Welcome back. I am Cassandra, and this is Fantasy Survival. Fantasy Survival is a series where I explore our favorite fantasy characters and what survival skills and our gear our favorite hero or villain might need to survive their particular fantasy world or situation. This is the second part of a multi-part series where we are using the 5c's of survival and exploring what the Dunedain Rangers from the Lord of the Rings survival gear would possibly be. The 5c's of survival are used in the survival or self-reliant world as a simple way to remember the basics of the basic gear needed when surviving in the wilderness. These 5c's are cutting, combustion, cover, containers, and cordage. Now, J.R.R. Tolkien uses a lot of medieval influences in his writing of Middle-earth, so we will be referencing a lot of medieval gear and skills when talking about these subjects. In the first episode, I talked about the gear a Dunedain Ranger would use in the cutting category. The next category we are going to look at in this video is combustion. This section deals with fire-making tools, skills, and tinder. The two main methods the Dunedain Rangers would use would be the flint and steel method and the friction method. The first method we are going to talk about is the flint and steel method. I think this would be the most used method for the Rangers of Middle-earth. Now, the flint and steel method is a primitive fire-making technique dating back into the Iron Age. This method literally comprises of a flintstone and a piece of steel. The piece of steel is usually curved to fit over a hand and fingers. Some were simple, others decorative. You could also use the back of a steel blade. The method is pretty simple. First, you take the sharp edge of the flintstone and violently strike the steel at an acute angle. The goal of this angle is to carefully, yet quickly, shave off small particles of metal. The pyrophoricity oxidizes in the air and sparks. The oxidizing sparks ignite the tinder underneath the flint and steel tool, which catches and eventually turns into fire. One of the benefits of the flint and steel method is the longevity of the materials. The average flint and stone tool is designed only to scrape off micro pieces of steel at a time, which means there's usually enough metal to make thousands of fires and hundreds of thousands of sparks. So depending on how often you make fires, one tool could last you for the better half of a decade. Additionally, flint and stone tools are designed to be around for the long haul. Although they can get rusty when left out in the rain, you can easily scrape it off and use a striker as if it's brand new. They are designed to withstand extreme conditions, which makes them the perfect tool. This leads us to the next benefit of the flint and steel method, and that they are all-weather material. It doesn't matter how cold, hot, or wet your striker gets, as long as you can clean it off and use a sharp piece of flint, you'll get your spark. The next method is the friction method. The general theory behind the friction fire lighting method is you grind two combustible materials together until the friction takes the material beyond its auto ignition temperature, creating an ember, which is then used to ignite timber. There are many different friction fire starting methods, such as the bow, hand drill, and plow. Maybe I will make a separate video talking about each method, but I won't go into detail about each friction method in this video. Several friction fire methods utilize wood as the medium for its process. The wood itself is not going to burst into flames. Instead, these methods create fine wood dust that is mostly charred. When enough heat is produced, some of this dust will turn into a red-hot ember. This ember, in turn, is placed into a tinder bundle, which will hopefully produce a flame. It is also important to note that while any wood can be used for these processes, softwoods are the best. By not using the right materials, these methods become even more frustrating. So rangers would probably have the skills and knowledge to identify the differences between a hardwood and a softwood. One of the benefits of a friction fire is that it not only keeps you warm once you get it going, but it also gets you warm while you're trying to make the fire. Also, most methods use materials easily found in your surroundings. It is also important to note, though, friction fires are not an easy way to start a fire, especially compared to the flint and steel method. But I still think rangers of the Middle Earth would at least have the knowledge of this process as a backup to the flint and steel method. Next thing I will talk about in the combustion section is tinder. Tinder could be anything dry and flammable. One of the main tinder used was called char cloth. Char cloth looks like a black, fragile piece of cloth. It is usually made from swatches of organic fabric, but similar tinder can be made in the same way using cotton balls, dried moss, leaves, or fungus. Char cloth is made by packing it into a small, almost airtight tin, then heating it slowly and steadily over coals for a long period of time, allowing it to undergo thermal decomposition. The material that remains after this process ignites very easily, making it the preferred tinder when lighting a fire using flint and steel. The Dunedain Rangers would utilize charred cloth, but to keep themselves agile and not too weighted down by extra gear, they would take advantage of their surroundings. They would use things such as dried leaves, grass, and even wood to make tinder. Wood tinder can be made by carefully shaving thin slivers off a large piece. One wood method which keeps these slivers together is known as a feather stick. A feather stick uses a length of wood which has been shaved to produce a cluster of thin curls protruding from the wood. It allows damp wood to be used to start a fire when dry tinder is hard to find. Feather sticks can be used with char cloth, where a small piece of the cloth is wound around the curls and a spark is struck onto it. This is then blown onto until the curls catch fire. The whole feather stick is then placed into the waiting kindle to start the campfire. Dunedain Rangers, knowing these fire starting methods, are important to their survival in Middle Earth. Fire can purify their water if they are in a place with no clean sources. Fire can cook food, which provides nutrients and strength needed to continue to fight the orcs and trolls that roam Middle Earth. Fire can be used as a signal or warning to others, and fire can provide warmth to a ranger when he's in a colder climate. Fire is important. The skill to start a fire is useful, and all rangers would have some basic knowledge of starting one. This has been my video on the combustion portion of the Dunedain Rangers 5C of survival. I hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for the next video.